Greetings, viewers! Night here, and I'm back at this reviewing thing. Last year I reviewed a fanfiction, but this time I'll be covering Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. A thing written by John Tiffany and Jack Thorne, based on Jack's play, which in turn is based on the Harry Potter series written by J.K. Rowling. I hesitate to call it a book, because not only is this simply the transcript for Jack's play, it reads more like internet fanfiction that somehow got published, and that Rowling allowed to have her name attached to. Slight disclaimer, if you're unfamiliar with the Harry Potter franchise, or just don't care for it, this probably won't be the video for you. If you are a Potterhead but unfamiliar with the Cursed Child, go purchase it, read it, and then come back to this video and listen to my continued attempts at analysis, despite me being a complete nobody on the internet. Considering I have already heard quite a bit about this book when it came out in 2016, and how none of those reviews were actually positive, I didn't go into this book with any great expectations when I picked it up at a Barnes & Nobles in Baltimore last year. But enough of me rambling, let's start the review. The story begins with the Deathly Hallows left off, with all the grown-up protagonists, and Draco Malfoy, saying bye to their kids on platform 9 3/4 as the youngsters prepare for their trip to Hogwarts. Albus Potter, the younger son of Harry and Ginny, expresses the main concerns he had at the end of Deathly Hallows. If we are to believe that this is in canon with DH, which I'm not inclined to, thank you very much, with Harry telling his son he's sure the sewing hat will put him in the house he's best suited for. During the train ride, Albus and Rose, Ron and Hermione's daughter, go upon Scorpius Malfoy, Draco Malfoy's son. Rose isn't that interested in talking to Scorpius, not only because her dad told her to avoid him, but because there's apparently a rumor going around about this kid. That rumor being that the Malfoys, who were desperate for a powerful heir, sent Draco's wife Astoria back in time with a time turner to the time when Lord Voldemort was still alive and convinced him to, well, the rest really should be obvious, shouldn't it? Despite word going around that Scorpius is a descendant of the worst dark wizard alive, Albus is still willing to be friends with Scorpius. I'm guessing this rumor about the Malfoys using time travel to have Voldemort's blood in their family is meant to be sort of a character arc for Draco and Scorpius. We see Draco several times in the book, and I suppose he's one of the better written characters in this story. Having pride in his family has always very much been a part of Draco's character, and I can imagine he'd have a lot of frustration concerning the rumors about his son. Although I'm gonna say that it feels like the writers had Astoria die off screen later on in the story, simply to make Draco a single parent and therefore arguably the more sympathetic character in comparison to Harry, who kind of looks like a douchebag later on in the book. But we'll get there when we get there. And then Scorpius goes through his own character arc of the story. Despite being the latest member of a family that has a very negative reputation, Scorpius is the exact opposite of the Malfoys that came before him, being a very meek boy who lacks self-confidence. He starts off as much more of a sidekick to Albus until much later in the book more than anything, until he has to face great dangers to rescue not just his best friend, but the entire wizarding world from a dark future. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. When we get to the Great Sorting, many students gather around Albus and gush over him being the son of Harry Potter. Among the students being sorted are Rose in the Gryffindor, and Scorpius in the Slytherin. Apparently the hat thinks Potters are destined to be in Slytherin, since that's the house it puts Albus into. The result is that all of Albus's fellow students, with the exception of Scorpius, either avoid or make fun of him. It doesn't help that Albus seems completely inept at everything and anything his dad was good at, not even being able to call his broomstick to his hand on the first day of flight class. Now I can say that this is good writing. It really does show how shallow people can be, especially kids in school. The day Albus arrives and everyone knows who he is, everyone wants to gather around him and treat him like he's something special. But the minute he's sorted into Slytherin, and Albus is shown to lack the same sort of talent as his dad, the students start to mock him. Unlike other Harry Potter books that tend to cover one solid year of school, except for after Dumbledore died, the first two scenes of Hogwarts take over the span of 2 to 3 years. We don't really get much info on what happened between these years, since of course there's no longer the threat of someone returning from the dead bent on conquering the world and bending others to their will. There aren't any interlinking mysteries to solve, and there's no adventures to be had. This is a bit of a formula break for something that has the Harry Potter brand on it. And now we come to an issue I have with this book. After establishing that Albus is being ridiculed at Hogwarts, we cut to Harry as an Auror at the Ministry of Magic. This is something that the book does quite often, cutting away from Albus and his storyline to focus on Harry and the other adults. Deathly Hallows did this too, but there it was established that Harry and Voldemort had a mental link, due to Harry being an unintentional Horcrux the night Voldemort attacked his family. Here, it feels like changing the scene just for the sake of it. Not that bad in of itself, since some of the scenes with Harry do contribute to the story's plot, but they happen so often, and sometimes I really don't care for how the scene or the characters in said scene are written, to be honest. In this scene, we learn that Nott has recently been arrested and was found with a time turner in his possession. Considering that all the time turners were supposedly destroyed in a raid on the Ministry of Magic, this surviving one is confiscated and put in the Department of Mysteries, the most dangerous department in the Ministry of Magic. Now, when I first read this, I really mistook the Nott Harry arrested to be the same Nott who served Voldemort. But when I reread it, I realized the sentence was talking about Theodore Nott. Theodore Nott was sort of a red herring at the end of the Half-Blood Prince when Draco was recruited, let's say, by the Death Eaters who led the assault on the Astronomy Tower. Even here it feels like Theodore serves merely as a plot device rather than an actual character. Considering he doesn't come into play at any other part of the story, he isn't as much a character as he's a catalyst for the next scene and the rest of the book. Oh, he just so happened to be carrying a time turner on him. How did he get it? We don't know and we never find out. The scene changes to Harry's house at nighttime. Albus is able to sneak down the stairs and hears a conversation between his dad and Amos Diggory. Why is Amos here? He somehow learned that the Ministry of Magic has Nott's time turner, and he wants to use it so he can go back in time to the night his son Cedric died and prevent Cedric's death. And here's where I have my first major issue. The character of Amos Diggory. When we first meet Amos, he is indeed a prideful man and considers his son the best of the best. And Cedric's death did hit him hard. However, when Harry told Amos why Cedric died, Amos seems to understand and accept that his son sacrificed himself for something greater than winning a competition. I can understand that Amos would want some closure, but what he wants here is to rewrite history, which, as we'll see later on in this book, has really negative consequences. The only reason there weren't any in The Prisoner of Azkaban was because it could be argued that Harry was meant to use the Patronus on the Dementors, bearing down on him, Hermione, and Sirius Black. Harry, of course, denies that there were any time turners left after they were all smashed years ago and dismisses Amos. But not before we're introduced to his niece Delphi, who I'm sure won't play an important role in this story at all. On the eve when Albus is getting ready to return to Hogwarts, Harry enters his room and presents him with a childhood keepsake. His old baby blanket. I'm guessing this is meant to be how Harry inherited his father's invisibility cloak, but as you might have guessed, Albus considers this gift rather insulting. In fact, it gets to the point where Albus starts to throw Harry's past in his face. And then this happens.
You know what? I'm done with being made responsible for your unhappiness. At least you've got a dad, because I didn't, okay?
I think that was unlucky, because I don't.
You wish me dead?
No, I just wish you weren't my dad.
Well, there are times I wish you weren't my son.
This scene isn't that uncommon, since kids have that "I hate you" moment a lot. And it's important for what happens later, due to Albus being fueled by his resentment towards his father. The next scene introduces us to a recurring theme with Harry in this story. Harry having dreams of his past that end with the voice of Voldemort calling out to him. While I'm sure the writers meant for these scenes to have some sort of purpose, to me at least, these dream scenes, along with later conversations between Harry and Ginny, just feel like padding. As the Hogwarts Express chugs along in the next scene, Rose tries her best to get close to Albus under her mother's orders. But Albus is too resentful towards her for not hanging around him after he got sorted into Slytherin. For whatever reason, Rose tells Albus about the time turner that was taken from Nott. If she thinks this will make Albus hang out with her, it does the exact opposite. Instead, it makes Albus seek out Scorpius and tell him they're going to break into the Department of Mysteries, use the time turner, go back to the Triwizard Tournament, and prevent the death of Cedric Diggory. This is stupid for several reasons. Not only is this a spur-of-the-moment plan born out of resentment towards his father, and dragging Scorpius along for whatever reason, he has no clue how to find the Ministry of Magic, nor does he know where the Department of Mysteries is within it. And then there's his plan of how they're even going to attempt to do any of this. Climb onto the roof of the train and jump off as it's passing a viaduct, then hightail it towards the Guild Folks Home where Amos Diggory lives to talk to him. Granted, Harry and his pals did do a lot of dangerous crap when they were kids, but jumping off a moving train was never one of them. Also, I have to wonder how Albus and Scorpius even climbed onto the roof of the train without being noticed in the first place. As they prepare to jump, however, the boys are approached by, of all things, the Trolley Witch, pushing her car towards them. At first she seems like her normal sweet self, but then things get creepy and ominous.
People don't know much about me. They see me sell cauldron cakes, but they never really notice me. I can't remember the last time someone asked me my name. I've forgotten it myself. All I can tell you is when the Hogwarts Express first came to be, Oteline Gamble herself offered me this job. Never have I let anyone off this train before it reached its final destination. Many have tried, like Sirius and his cronies, and Fred and George Weasley. All failed. So please, retake your seats for the remainder of the journey.
And then she transforms into something both horrific and weird. Her hair goes crazy wild, and her hands transform into spikes. Did I mention that she throws her pastries around like grenades? Yeah, she throws pastries around like they're grenades. And this is the part where I stopped reading and asked myself, why? In my head multiple times. There are a lot of scenes in the book that caused me to do this, but this was the scene that made me sit up and go, what the fuck? Not only for what the story does with an established character, but because the scene comes straight out of nowhere. Of course the boys get away, and find their way to the old folks' home where Amos Diggory lives, where he is tended to by Delphi. Of course Amos is skeptical about the plan Albus suggests to him. He is aware that kids have done crazy and impossible things in the universe before, right? But Delphi convinces him by saying she'll be joining the boys on their quest. Now you may be asking, how are 3 people going to break into the mystery of magic and steal an item intended for the illegal use of time travel? By using Polyjuice Potion to masquerade as Ron, Harry, and Hermione, who has become the new Minister of Magic. This, as you might expect, results in several awkward shenanigans before they reach Hermione's office where the Time Turner is being held. If you're at all familiar with the HP series, you'll know that Hermione Granger loves books, and is considered the smartest student at Hogwarts. So the key to finding where Hermione is hiding the Time Turner is through solving a puzzle from a talking book that's kept in her bookshelf.
If I could give you detention, Minister, I would. Keeping hold of a time turner, of all stupid things, and in a bookshelf. It's most laughable.
Let's talk about how Hermione has written this story, shall we? You would expect her to be a tad more competent than her predecessors Fudge, who was perfectly willing to ignore the return of Voldemort, and Scrimgeour, who just wanted to use Harry as a prop to convince the Wizarding World that the Mystery was winning the war against the Dark Lord's army. But in the previous scene I didn't talk about, she seems less skilled at getting people under her authority to listen to her than her predecessors. Everyone at an earlier meeting had just tried to walk out, and she simply meekly called, "Come back." She's used Polyjuice Potion to sneak around in the past, and keeps forbidden magical items in the bookcase in her office that are protected through riddles. How she never thought that anyone determined and clever enough would come along is sort of beyond me. After all, the Death Eaters were able to break into supposedly highly protected places before, and who's to say that the ones that weren't captured couldn't use Polyjuice Potion to masquerade as mystery officials to sneak in? All they'd have to do is get close enough to Hermione and use the Imperius Curse to make her do whatever they want. It happened before with Thickness. The second half of the story opens up with Harry having a dream that he sees Albus in the Forbidden Forest wearing Durmstrang robes. Since Albus and Scorpius were reported to have not shown up when the train arrived at Hogwarts, this causes Harry and Ginny, along with Hermione, to go to Hogwarts and ask McGonagall to help them search for the boys, who are clearly being manipulated by Delphi. Draco joins the search for the boys as well, his reasoning being, if Harry Potter's involved, something serious must be going down soon. Harry travels into the Forbidden Forest and encounters the Centaur Bane, and asks Bane if he has seen Albus. After the regular anti-human insults, Bane tells Harry that Albus is surrounded by a dark cloud. And Harry assumes he means Scorpius. Yeah, more on that later. The boys are indeed in the Forbidden Forest, and succeed in using the Time Turner to go back to the first day of the Triwizard Tournament to sabotage Cedric. All Albus manages to do is disarm Cedric before an unforeseen time limit hurls them back to the present day. What's more, Albus is in serious pain due to an unforeseen injury he received from being hurled back, and is taken to the hospital wing when Harry finds him and Scorpius. It's in the hospital wing that Harry has a conversation with a portrait of his old mentor, Dumbledore. While the portrait does give the same sort of sage advice that actually living Dumbledore would, Harry misinterprets it terribly. Feeling his son's friendship with Scorpius is what is causing Albus pain. Harry orders his son to break off the friendship when Albus wakes up. Later on, we find that Harry has told McGonagall to use the Marauder's map to spy on the two boys and keep them apart. And if she doesn't, Harry will bring down the full might of the Ministry on Hogwarts. And it was here that I facepalmed and confused the frustration. Let's forgive Harry for misconstruing what the portrait of his mentor said. Harry's always been the type not to fully grasp what Dumbledore has said to him a few times. But Bane is one of the centaurs with the anti-human mindset, and would probably make up crap just to hurt Harry. Harry should be skeptical of this particular centaur. Then we have this scene, where he threatens one of his old teachers to do as he requests, or he'll attack his old school with the power of the Ministry of Magic. You know, the exact same thing Umbridge tried to do in Order of the Phoenix. Yes, Harry has a history of making poor decisions fueled by emotion and stubbornness. But he should know better than to be this big of an ass towards people who know better by now. No joke, when I first read the scene between Harry and McGonagall, I walked away from the book maybe 4 times, questioning why the writers would do this. Moving away from this bit of character stupidity. It seems Albus has changed things, but not in the way he intended. Not only did Ron and Hermione not get married, and thus never had Rose as their daughter, Ron never inherited his brother's joke shop, and Hermione is the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, who treats her class, or at least Albus, like complete morons. In the next scene, we get more of Harry being a stubborn douchebag. Insisting that Scorpius is a bad influence on Albus, Harry begins to fight with Draco. Unfortunately for Harry, it appears that Draco has kept his skills sharp, while Harry seems to be a bit rusty. We don't really see the end result of this fight, other than Draco apologizing to Ginny for having destroyed her kitchen during the duel. Draco also admits he was always secretly jealous of Harry, since Harry had actual friends, and Crabbe and Goyle just felt like lackeys to Draco. Considering Crabbe's attitude towards Draco in the Deathly Hallows, I can personally believe that Crabbe never considered Draco his friend at all. While this does feel a tad out of character for Draco, it doesn't make me dislike him, and shows that perhaps he matured a bit over the years. While this is going on, Delphi enters Hogwarts and convinces Scorpius to continue talking with Albus, so that they can undo the loss of Rose and continue with their original goal. Scorpius does talk to Albus in the library, but because Albus doesn't want to get over his daddy issues, Scorpius loses his temper and vents about how other people have problems. They make up and use the invisibility cloak. Yeah, I forget exactly how and where they got it. Like a lot of things in this book, it just sort of turns up without clear explanation, to hide while McGonagall is searching for them, and enters the girls' bathroom Moaning Myrtle calls home. The two boys manage to once again travel back in time, taking a ball of gillyweed with them. Like the invisibility cloak, it's never explained where they got it from or how, although I guess we could speculate that Delphi gave both of them to Scorpius. But that just raises further questions, so they can sabotage Cedric during the second Triwizard Tournament event. It's also at this time that Harry, having got over his douchebagness, breaks into the bathroom along with Hermione, Ginny, McGonagall, and Draco, just in time to see the boys escape to the past. Albus and Scorpius are indeed successful in getting Cedric disqualified, but upon return to the present, Scorpius discovers that he is alone. Not only that, but Dolores Umbridge is now the headmistress of Hogwarts, who chastises Scorpius for causing a disturbance on Voldemort Day, the celebration in memory of when Voldemort killed Harry Potter in the Battle of Hogwarts. So yeah, the boys did indeed succeed in preventing Cedric's death. And while we can't assume Harry escaped a reborn Voldemort as he did in the Goblet of Fire, circumstances changed just enough to where Harry died in his final duel with Voldemort. In a way, Albus succeeded in his goal of no longer living his dad's shadow by accidentally erasing himself and his siblings from history. And in this future, the wizarding world is ruled by the Death Eater mentality that Muggles, Muggle-borns, and their sympathizers are pure scum and deserve to be imprisoned and tortured. While in this timeline, The Malfoys are still among the most respected and wealthy families. While Scorpius has become the most popular student in Hogwarts, he knows that this future is wrong in every sense of the word and must correct it. But he knows he can't do it alone. Learning that Severus Snape is still alive in this timeline, and having heard the story of exactly who Snape is, Scorpius goes to him in the hopes that Snape will be able to help. However, assuming that the Scorpion King, Scorpius' nickname at school, has gone mad, Snape attempts to dismiss little Scorpius. That is, until Scorpius reminds Snape about Harry's mother. This causes Snape to listen and believe rather quickly. I want you to remember, in this timeline, Snape was not lethally bitten by Nagini, which just sort of raises questions about how Voldemort could use the Elder Wand in the first place, but we're not focusing on that. And thus he would not have asked Harry to take his last bit of memories about what he said to Dumbledore. By all rights, Snape should be questioning how Scorpius knows this. Instead, he just sort of goes along with it, and takes Scorpius to the last few people who are still resisting this new reign, Hermione and Ron, who likewise believe Scorpius' story rather easily, but are understandably willing to undo this dark future, even if that means Snape has to sacrifice his own life. They don't really succeed the first time, and when the quartet returns to this dark present, Hermione and Ron are stripped of their souls by Dementors. When approached by Umbridge, she reveals that she always knew Snape was part of the Resistance, and was just waiting for him to have one misstep to prove it. Snape fights Umbridge, sacrificing himself in the process, so that Scorpius may escape to the past and undo everything. Scorpius arrives just in time, stopping Albus from sabotaging Cedric. At first, Albus is annoyed, but Scorpius tells him what might have happened had he succeeded. Although, as this book has already established, changing the past to any degree will result in an altered future either way. Although I suppose you could argue that the Scorpius that stops Albus is the Scorpius that helped Albus sabotage Cedric the second time, but with the knowledge that if they succeed here, that Death Eaters will rule in the future, and... well, that really isn't how time travel works, at least I don't think. Because if you go back in time to stop your past self, it's one version of you interacting with the previous version of you, not you changing places with the previous you, and the previous you changing places with the other you, and...
Time travel is stupid.
After being found by the adults in the proper timeline, Albus is properly lectured by McGonagall and then has to talk with his father. This is a really good scene where both father and son admit to their mistakes and say that they will try to understand each other better in future. So yeah, I guess we have a nice bit of closure there. There's still one thing to do, however. The Time Turner must be destroyed so no one can ever use it again. Albus contacts Delphi, who just sort of disappeared after the boys succeeded in sabotaging the second task, and she offers to destroy the Time Turner for them. However, Scorpius comes to the realization that Delphi may have had other reasons for wanting to use the Time Turner. Oh, shock and awe. It turns out Delphi was the villain of this entire story. It seems especially apparent that Delphi was the bad guy when she got excited from hearing that there was a timeline where Voldemort ruled. Who could have foreseen this sudden betrayal? Turns out, Delphi is the child of Voldemort and Draco's deranged aunt, Bellatrix. Her goal this entire time has been to rewrite history so that her father is the victor of the war from 22 years ago. She would have stolen and used the Time Turner herself to enact her scheme, but there was a prophecy that said only a child of Harry Potter could bring about this change in history. Delphi isn't about to let everything she worked for go to waste, however, and since the boys aren't going to willingly help her anymore, Delphi kidnaps them and threatens them with death to help her. I hadn't had any issues with Act 3 until this. While it doesn't cause me as much annoyance as Harry becoming a douche due to talking to a centaur and a portrait of his mentor, Delphi revealing that she's Voldemort's child and her convoluted plan really feel like something out of fanfiction to me. Oh, she also says this.
I don't just want you to stop him. I want you to humiliate him! He needs to fly out of that maze naked on a broomstick made of purple feather dusters!
We also learn that the reason she wanted Voldy to rule the world is because, and I swear this is her actual motivation, she never got to meet her father. Yes, this whole thing is because of a woman with daddy issues. However, it isn't Albus or Scorpius who foils Delphi's plans. It's Cedric Diggory himself. Wanting to protect two children from a clearly dangerous woman, Cedric manages to disarm and bind Delphi before continuing on with his part of the third trial. Enraged she'll never have the future she desires, Delphi manages to enact her backup plan. To travel back to the night where Voldemort attacked the Potter family, and to tell them not to attack little baby Harry Potter, thereby canceling the prophecy that caused Voldemort's first downfall. And after traveling back to the year that this is supposed to happen, Delphi destroys the Time Turner, leaving her, Albus, and Scorpius stranded in the past. This doesn't matter, however, since a few scenes later that we learned from Draco that his family had a time turner that was to be used in emergencies. But how did the adult characters know that they have to time travel, you might be asking me? All I feel I can really tell you, it has something to do with that blanket Harry gave Albus at the start of the story. If ever I was going to use the term Deus Ex Machina, it would be here. All previous Harry Potter books had a clever way of leading up to a plot twist. But here, it feels like the only reason Draco has a time turner of his own is because the writers realized they'd written the boys into a corner, and Alice and Scorpius couldn't be rescued any other way. Of course, the adults write with the same timeline as the kids, and it's happily ever after for everyone after they defeat and capture Delphi. Now, time for my final thoughts. While rereading the story for the purposes of this script wasn't as painful as I thought it would be, there were still a lot of parts of the book that I got annoyed with. While jumping to conclusions and being a bit of a douche as part of Harry's character, said character is meant to be an adult here. Yeah, you can argue that even adults can be douchebags. There was just something written about Harry's character that rubbed me the wrong way. And while I suppose his dreams about hearing Voldemort's voice were meant to be building up to something, it was just completely lost upon me. If anyone else who read this book caught what I didn't, please tell me what the purpose of these dreams were meant to be. I honestly wasn't that fond of Albus, mainly because his entire motivation throughout half of this book is just so they can one-up his dad. Yeah, he does realize what he was trying to do later on was selfish, stupid, and dangerous. But even then, I found I didn't care for him like I did the original trio of Harry, Ron, and Hermione. For me, Albus started off unlikable and stayed unlikable. I also feel that a few of the scenes were just too convenient in order to help the plot move along. Again, how did Albus and Scorpius get onto the roof of the Hogwarts Express without being noticed? How would Delphi have known Nott had a time turner? I am willing to think that maybe Delphi stole Gillyweed for the two boys so they could sabotage Cedric during the second task. Maybe I skipped over the scene where she gives the Gillyweed to Scorpius. Maybe I skipped over the scene where Scorpius somehow got Harry's old invisibility cloak. I don't know, anyone else who read the book can point out where they got these things and how, but it all just feels way too convenient for me. One thing I'm sure no one will be able to argue is just how conveniently everyone seems to have Polyjuice Potion at the ready. Last time I checked, it wasn't sold in stores anywhere. I still feel the reveal that Draco had a time turner of his own was a literal fix everything button, and that Albus was able to use an old baby blanket that belonged to his father to communicate with his father across space and time. I still don't get or care how that worked. To me, what stops it from being a Deus Ex Machina like Draco's time turner was that the blanket had been established towards the start of this book. Really, the only issue I had with scenes changing from the kids to the adults was that it felt like padding. Yeah, I get that some scenes help move the story along later on, but like Harry's dreams, they just felt like they were there to take up time. If I'm going to read a story about the adventure of Harry's son, I want to read the adventures of Harry's son, not constantly be switched from Albus to Harry. I was far more invested in the time travel story than how Harry has PTSD from 22 years ago. The main problem I have with the scene transitions is that we barely focus on a single location. Some scenes are literally just a page or two long. Maybe it's a personal thing, maybe it's the fact that this was written as a script rather than a book, but it's annoying how little each scene provides the reader. If I don't get enough of a feel for the environments or the characters, I'm not really going to care about them. And again, because this is written like a screenplay, description of both is sadly next to non-existent. Overall, while rereading the book didn't enrage me as much as the first time I read it, there are still more cons than pros to keep any true Harry Potter fan from enjoying this story. Anyways, I am Night saying thanks for listening, and please share your thoughts with me.